Hello, and on this video I'm going to be talking about Led Zeppelin's third album, which is called, quite aptly and correctly, Led Zeppelin III, and it is this album here. This here is the special edition, which I also want to talk about as well. Why do you want to talk about Led Zeppelin III? Well, I think Led Zeppelin sometimes gets shortchanged. I see every now and then on my channel that people will go, oh, they're overrated. And the reason why they think they're overrated, I think, is because of two reasons. One of the things is that if on some of the live recordings, they can be a bit scrappy, and that is without a doubt the case. And I will talk about that in a bit. But also because on the first two albums, groundbreaking that they are, and they really lay the groundwork for hard rock, heavy metal. It's very derivative of a lot of other tunes, not just old blues tunes, but also old folk tunes, and especially tunes by Bert Jansch. So, there's this accusation of plagiarism. Now, I don't think that's the case. I think there is a tradition within, American blues, which was carried on by the British blues musicians, and it was really plugging into songs that have been around since the beginning of time almost. But I would say that Led Zeppelin, its success was down to channeling what other groups had already done already, primarily Cream and the Jeff Beck group, but with very charismatic musicians, a big budget and very good production. And this propels Led Zeppelin to the fore. And by the time this album's made, and this album was recorded in 1970, the band were formed in the back end of 68. So basically, in 69, they toured the world, conquered it, and made two of the greatest rock albums ever made, Led Zeppelin I and Led Zeppelin II. So by the time they take a bit of time off in 1970 to have a rethink, this is about, where do we go now? Now, this album here, those of you will know that, and I am now getting a reputation for mentioning it, but it's very hard to talk about, Led Zeppelin, one of my favourite bands, or talk about one of my favourite albums without reference to the fact that I did play drums for Robert Plant for a number of years. And this album here, this box set, was actually given to me by Robert when these were released. They brought out a whole bunch of albums with extra stuff on, and he had the whole collection, and I was, chatting to him. He said, which one of these would you like? And you want to say, well, I want all of them. But you don't want to say that because that would be impolite. So I said, I don't know, Robert. And he goes, what's your favourite album? And I went, well, there's two probably. It's Presence and Led Zeppelin III, which are my sort of favourite ones. And he turned around and said something that stuck in my mind. He went, Led Zeppelin III. That's the album where we found ourselves. That's the album where we finally innovated. So there is an idea from Robert himself that this is a very special album. And how do they innovate on it? Well, they innovate almost like accidentally. When they come to write this album, they're burnt out, and there is no plan to write this album. Jimmy Page and Robert Plant, who have only known each other for just over a year, decide to probably do a bit of bonding by going out to an old cranky house in North Wales with no gas or electric, called Broniar. I don't know how to say it. Broniar, right? Which is near Machynlleth in North Wales. And when they get there, obviously they've taken their acoustic guitars up. And I think the writing process was quite organic. They didn't plan to do it, but the what we could call the Welsh aesthetic, not the English aesthetic, starts to take hold. Robert has the English aesthetic in bucket loads, but he even has the Welsh aesthetic even more. And what you got here was an album influenced by the likes of Bert Jansch, influenced by the likes of the Incredible String Band and other sort of British folk artists. And by channeling that against the blues and actually seeing the links between British folk music forms, we could call them Anglo-Celtic music forms, and the blues, and there is a link there, despite what some people say, they find common ground within that. So when they go into the studio, and I think this was recorded in a number of places, I'm not too sure. I'm pretty sure it was recorded at Olympic, where they first recorded the first album, and then they went out and did some of this over at Headley Grange with the mobile. I can't see anything on the album that states that. Anyway, and what we get here, for me, is they find their sound by channeling a sort of rustic primitivism on this album. Of course, it opens up with the Great Immigrant Song, which is perhaps their greatest rocker they ever did. It's the personification of Zeppelin in a way, even more than Whole Lotta Love. This was, of course, inspired by their trip to Ireland just before they did a tour on there, where I think there was like a civil servant strike or something, and the tour wasn't going to happen, but then the fans stepped in, so they had this very warm sort of reception there, you know, and so this inspired that opening line, "I come from the land of the ice and snow." But what's far more interesting for me is that strange sound that comes spinning in before Immigrant Song. That's created in the studio. That's an accident. That is the tapes rewinding and the sound of that being caught, which Jimmy Page has then sent through an echoplex. And so suddenly we see a level of studio experimentation going on, which we haven't seen before. The drums on this album are all recorded using the Glyn Johns method, which is basically two overheads, one mic positioned low by the floor tom pointing at the snare drum, and one mic high above the drum kit pointing at the snare drum. I'm going to do a video on this because it's an incredible miking system. And then a bass drum mic out in front of the bass drum. So there's no close miking. So what we're getting is a photograph of not only John Bonham playing the drums and controlling the sound rather than the engineer setting the levels. There's the famous story that when they went into to do some additional recording for this album, they started to close mic the kits, and the end, you know, John Bonham said, "Why are you doing that for? Just stick three mics up like Glyn Johns did." And they said, "Yeah, but we've got more control over the levels if we do that." And John Bonham turned around and said, "Well, isn't that my job?" And he is right. It was his job, and it is the job of a drummer to do that. And so I have used the Glyn Johns miking method on a lot of my albums because of that very reason. It's a photograph of the drum kit, and that sound permeates this album. When we get to Friends, and then going into Celebration Day, famously, segue between those tracks, the drums were recorded over, and John Paul Jones on a Moog synthesizer created a drone, and you get that sort of spinning backwards effect as the track comes in. When I first heard this album as a youngster, I was a little bit shocked that it wasn't a rocker, you know, and I think the expectations on this album from the audience that had actually pre-ordered 1 million copies before it came out was the same thing, where the rockers. And so there was a little bit of a sort of letdown, I think, with this album. And I can remember feeling a little bit like that. And then you start to go into it. And one of the things that drew me in was that otherworldliness of the tape experimentation. On track 4, Since I've Been Loving You, you get, I think, the first properly successful proper blues by Led Zeppelin. I was never too convinced by those blues tracks like You Shook Me All Night Long on the first album, and Bring It On Home. They really seemed too much of a pastiche for me. But on Since I've Been Loving You, the bringing in of that English aesthetic, I think it turns that into its own thing, and suddenly we have the idea of a Led Zeppelin blues, which then they go on to do on tracks like When the Levee Breaks and Tea for One. And so that track for me is very important in the Led Zepp history. If you listen to it, it sounds to me like drums, vocal, Hammond organ, no bass, and electric guitar. And for me, it's always been a brilliant example of a band in the room just playing and capturing a vibe. So I was really shocked when doing a little bit of research for this to find out that Jimmy Page overdubbed that guitar solo, and he did it in one take. And the reason he overdubbed it, because he wasn't happy with his guitar sound, and he was searching around, went out into the corridor, and sat there is this amp, you know, that some other band had used, tiny little amp. He brings it in, plugs it in, doesn't even touch it, and that's the sound of the guitar on that track. It finishes out with Out on the Tiles, which for many years was my favourite Led Zepp track. This is another rocker. We've only really got 2 rockers on here, Immigrant Song and Out on the Tiles. But Out on the Tiles is funkier. But the reason I liked it because it's one of Bonham's great moments. People talk about John Bonham and they go on about Kashmir and things like this and Moby Dick. But for me, it's always other stuff, and he's just unbelievable. Now, when you flip the album over, you get a lot more of acoustic stuff. We get Gallows Pole, which is, of course, a cover of a traditional folk song made famous by Leadbelly in the 1930s, 1940s, which was called Gallows Pole. We then get Tangerine, an acoustic track by Jimmy Page. Then That's the Way, another acoustic track, this time by Jimmy Page and Robert Plant. And these are opening the sort of the door to Stairway to Heaven on the next album. We get Bronner Stomp, which is what sounds like it sounds like. It sounds like a stomp, very English folk, but not. It's Led Zeppelin's own version of it. And then we get this strange blues, and that's the only track I'm not too sure of, which is called Hats Off to Roy Harper, where they do this sort of pastiche of a blues. Now, the album's famous for this incredible cover. It had this incredible wheel where you could cycle it round, you know, and get all these different viewpoints. I, of course, always had it set there with John Bonham poking his little head out there and there. If you keep going around, you'll find that there is a little bit of a consistency in that if you go around, and then you get the next guy there, right, and you've got Robert there, and then you haven't got Robert anywhere else. So that's that theory going down the pan, isn't it? I've got 2 versions of this. On another video where I go through iconic album covers, I got my other album and I destroyed it for you by actually ripping out and showing you the circle, but I'm not going to do that here. On this one, which is the extended edition, you get that on the back. Let's open this all up. This is quite a package. So let's open this all up. So we get all that here. Oh, I love that picture, Led Zeppelin. You get all that here, and then so the extra thing must be that they must have created that. That's an extra thing. Anyway, whoa, nothing in there. Right, on here we get an extra disc, which I'm a little bit worried is not in here at the moment. What have I got in here? This is weird. So that's the actual album, isn't it? Where's my extra disc? I've got a lot of records, you know, but I lose a lot of records. And sometimes on this channel I go, oh, I'm going to do a video about so-and-so. And then when I go and try and look for the album, it's completely gone. Oh, it's in the middle section, isn't it? You see, it's in here. So this here is the additional disc. And I'm going to just go through what you get on that. Oh, come on. Sorry about this. Right, so this is the oh my god, the thickness of this. This is a right big wadge of vinyl. It's so beautiful. Look at that, it's solid. So on here we get this looks like the same thing again. Not that one then. This has gone wrong, hasn't it? God, have a look at this bloke here. Have you seen this Andy Edwards? It's bloody useless. I was watching another video on Led Zeppelin 3 and it was all properly done with a proper voiceover, loads of facts. He doesn't know anything. And he can't even take a record out of a cover. Right, so there we go. Yes, I am incompetent. I do apologise for it. It is a thing that I am. And I know I am. And I readily admit to it, right? And you can see, look at that infinity going on there. Look at that. You could see my little iPhone recording anyway. Should we not get drawn into that? So what? There we go. Led Zeppelin III companion disc. It's got Immigrant Song on it. Friends Celebration Day and Since I've Been Loving You, which I think are alternative mixed with a few extra details. You've got a track called Bathroom Sound, which I think is the early Out on the Tiles, because it's credited to Page, Plant and Bonham, because I think that was who that was there when they did that. We get an alternative version of Gallows Pole, That's the Way, and we get, of course, the famous Jennings Farms Blues, which is a track recorded at this time that didn't come out of this album. And then you get them playing Key to the Highway, Trouble in Mind, 2 classic blues tunes. So this is full of all sorts of extra stuff for fans of this incredible album. Well, I've got to the end of the video. I will put this out, even though I didn't do a good job. I felt like I had too much to say. I don't know. Let's put all this back, because I got feared. I got feared when I thought I'd lost that disc, because I think this has got to be worth something. This one, hasn't it? Anyway, it's nice to have a little deep dive into a specific album every now and then. I'm trying to do that a lot more on the channel, so I hope you appreciate these much more shorter videos and the concept behind them. I should just sort this out. Right, we're done. No, we're not. I can't even put it back in the box. Ah! Well, that went well. It's bloody rubbish, this bloke. Have you seen it? It's terrible, that was. I could have done a better job than that. You could have well done a better job than that. So why do I leave this level of incompetence on this channel? Well, I'm going to tell you why, seriously, why I don't just hit stop and do it again. And the reason is because I believe that YouTube as an art form, as a creative communication channel, is different to proper film or television, and it's different to mainstream media, it's different to books and stuff like that, right? I think it's different. And this stuff is quite ephemeral that I do on here. There's 780 videos, and they are documenting something which I believe should be alive. And there is always the hope that something happens on these that you couldn't allow to happen on mainstream media, because if you've got a film crew and you've got like cameras and lights, then you have a script and you have an editing schedule and all that type of stuff. Once you get to that sort of point, you have to sort of go in sort of knowing what you're talking about. I've found that it's far more interesting in terms of video to go in not knowing what you've talked about and just to hang back and see what happens. And often what happens is stuff that you didn't plan for. Now, as I'm saying this to you, I've now got quite used to just filming, stopping, and then banging the video up. Whatever happens, happens. That's my concept now to YouTube. I'm 56 years old. I've worked in the music industry for over 30 years. I'm a huge music fan. I've also lectured in pop music history. So I've got stuff to draw on. I'm not just some bloke making this up, right? I've got something to draw on, experiences and sort of academic research into the history of popular music. So that's why I'm here. But what's far more interesting for me is the chance that I may stray into an area and be exploring the concept of that in front of you. So you're following that as a story. Now, here I am now faced with a conundrum, because I didn't plan, of course, to make this a long video. This is supposed to be a short video, and I'm watching me coming up to 20 minutes. So it's no longer just a video about Led Zeppelin, isn't it? Because I cocked up so much, I mean, it's trying to take a record out has sort of messed me up a little bit. And I had so much to say. I didn't say it all. And I'm not happy with the video at all, really. But I could come back to it again at a certain point in time. But what's interesting is it's made me think, why am I doing this? And I then think, what am I talking about? I'm talking about Led Zeppelin III. And as I said, the thing about this album that for me blew me away was the sort of lo-fi-ness, the want to get out of the recording studio, the proper place, the place where proper albums are made. For these artists at this time to want to get out, you know, Jimmy Page and Rob Plant wanted to get out to some place where there's not even electricity or gas. And then when they went to the recording studios, they first go to Olympic. But this is a cold, empty, soulless recording studio designed to create pop music. And they think, is there any way of doing this? And Jimmy Page, you know, says, well, why don't we build our own studio? They start to talk to Glyn Johns about doing this, the mobile studio that they could just move around in. And then they find out that the Rolling Stones have already done this, and they have the Rolling Stones mobile recording studio. That costs £1,000 a week to hire. And then they have a lovely mansion where you can stop, you know, be like a rock star. And that also costs £1,000 a week, not an hour. And oh my God, see, I'm not doing very well today. Bear with me, I'm nearly at the end of this one. There will be something here at the end. So Jimmy Page doesn't want to give, you know, £1,000 a week to the Rolling Stones for going in this posh mansion. So he finds a much more crankier place called Headley Grange, which is, again, hasn't got proper heating, and it's full of ghosts and dampness and spiders and all that sort of stuff. And that is the environment which they make Led Zeppelin III, and more importantly, Led Zeppelin IV, the Untitled album. That wish to sort of just get outside of the proper realm, that wish to embrace happy accidents, that wish to be willing to go wrong. And this album is full of those happy accidents. It's full of those mistakes. This is the point where rock music got to a level of control, in the artist's control of what they were doing, that they could then start to explore, in a way, their own incompetence, or to put it more lightly, to put more aptly, they could look at what they were doing and sit back and see what that aesthetically meant, rather than trying to force the issue, which is always behind commercialism. When we look at the modern recording music scene, we see a commercialism out there which is completely been commodified, you know. So there's a certain drum sound, there's a certain vocal sound, there's a certain formula that you have for popular music there, and you look there into where it was, you know, 50 years ago. It's no longer there, but it exists here on YouTube. This is where you can do it. This is where somebody can come out and just go, this is real life, this is me, and that's what you get, right? And a lot of the information that I've trotted out on this video, which comes from either the internet or the YouTube videos, Wikipedia, you can get that from anywhere. But the truth is the little kernel of wisdom that comes out of it. And on this, it's how important not doing it right is, going wrong, and being willing to just put that out there and let other people be the judgment of, you know, the judge of whether it's any good or not. There's the wisdom for you. I don't know whether it is or not. I'm very stuttery today. You can watch videos where I'm a lot more articulate, but I'm a bit stuttery today. It's a Sunday morning. I haven't had a lot of sleep. I didn't plan to do these videos. This is why I'm not in my big posh studio. I thought I need a bunch of these short videos, and here I am coming up to the half-hour point on this one. Led Zeppelin III. The music inspires you, doesn't it? It was inspired me anyway. I hope it inspires you. And I hope this video inspired you and you didn't think it was just a bunch of incompetent rubbish, although I've got a funny feeling it was. Anyway, that's what it is. I'm done. I ain't going to lose any sleep about it. So if you like this video, stick a like on it. Have I done all that already? Oh my God, this one is rubbish. Bloody hell, Andrew. Just get out of here. See you all. Bye-bye.